And we're discussing still as essentially the union from Shefa, in contrast to Yesh Miyayin, which you haven't even touched yet. Shefa, by definition, means that something of the mashpia, something that is significant to the mashpia, is being given over to the mushma. This is the meaning for Shefa. And with that, there is a profound effect on the mushma, that he is actually lifted and transformed to a different orientation. And the Rebbe is giving us an extremely simple, low-down example for that moshel. Very difficult to see in that moshel, the need for mashpia and mekabel, but with all the detailed elaboration, it is incumbent on us to focus into it and see what the point is that the Rebbe is making. An example, a moshel for Shefa, is a rock being thrown up into the air. So we explained, based on the moshel, clearly there is significance in this moshel. And what is in fact the significance in this? If we look at the rock, a simple rock on the worldly level, then there is absolutely no way to correlate this phenomenon, this throw of the rock, to a motion of Shefa, Mashpia, Mekab. And yet the Rebbe insists that there is a tremendous effect, his chadshus in the rock, and his chadshus and the islapshus. Islapshus means being dressed up, being focused on, is both from the mashpia, from the thrower, and the rock. The rock also undergoes a tremendous transformation. The rock so focusing into this union.
Can I ask a question? The mashal is more on Ur and Shefa versus Mashpia and Mor. Would it be a little bit different? In other words, is it mukhrach to say that it's mamish exactly like a Mashpia?
That's what he's trying to say. He said this is like a moshel for Shefa.
But Shefa is not a Mashpia. Shefa is the object that's being mushma.
Wait a second. Shefa can happen only if there's a mashpia. Shefa, like we explained, the whole phenomenon of rock flying up, who is it coming from? The rock doesn't even know such thing exists. Who presents it to the rock? The human being? Thank you very much.
So, Hamshachas hamayim imakim l'makim.
What?
Hamshachas hamayim imakim l'makim.
Wait a second. You want to go? This is two different mishonim.
Okay, but because
the Hamshachas hamayim imakim.
it's also considered.
Yeah, the emphasis over there is not on his chachus. There's no his chachus there. Because mine flows down, and that's no his chachus. The mokim is to denote that when there is hashpoah, there is a tangible aspect, something of that which makes up the mashpia, the source, that is given. To the extent that when you take that from the source, you're reducing that aspect from the source. That's what it's saying. That's a different opinion.
So that's my question. Maybe the same thing is, why do we need to say that the rock is mamish al derech mashpia?
The Rebbe says it.
No,
I'm trying to learn what the Rebbe is saying.
But the Rebbe is only saying that it's on the level of shefa, not on the level of mashpia.
Yeah. Who is mashpia? Not the rock is not a mashpia. The person who is throwing it is mashpia. He has the effect in him, and the thrower, the hazoyrik, is mislabish in the singing.
So in a certain level, why shouldn't we just take a mashal of mashpia and a Talmud? Why are we a mashal of mayim, a mashal of tzedakah, a mashal of a rock? Let him take a mashal of mashpia and Talmud.
Very, very good question. And at first glance, of the Kaf answer is that when you're talking about mashpia and makabel, there's so much hidden phenomena that's going on there. You cannot identify what is really happening. When you look at the rock being thrown, this is isolating. This happening at a simple physical level. If you're going to talk about a mashpia, you have to go and understand what's going on in the mind of the mashpia, and there's deeper and deeper and deeper. There's only there's seichel, there's midas involved. It's a whole a human structure. This is a very simple mashal, and the mashal that he's trying to bring out is that in shefa he's giving him something of substance. And when you give something of substance, inevitably you're going to have an effect. You're changing his whole perspective. We spoke about before, somebody asked me about Oni and Oshir. That the Oshir gives Dokir to the Oni. So we asked, why does the Rebbe choose a Moshe from an Oshir to an Oni? Oni also gives Dokir. The halacha is that anybody who has one penny more than the other, he's already an Oshir relative to this, he has to give him Dokir. So why does he Oshir? So we explained the motion of Oshir, why the Rebbe chooses Oshir, is because Oshir this is where there is Shafa. If a Noni gives Dokir to a Noni, that's not called Shafa. Why? Because the Oni is giving Dokir because he feels the lack of the Oni. He's just filling in his shortage. If somebody is thirsty, you're giving a glass of water. That's not how it's called Shafa. You're reviving him. And Oshir, he approaches a completely different direction. He does not know there's such thing as lacking anything.
To remain on this call, press 1.
He's not giving him because he feels his lack. He's giving him because he has. So this talent he gives him comes from a source, from a source of abundance. And this is what this represents.
That the owner should also have that kind of reality?
Well, it doesn't have that kind of reality, but he senses that there is such thing.
Oh.
So there's no hischadshus davar by the ani?
There is no hischadshus. You don't have to plead with the oni and convince him to take the dollar.
And by the rock
He'll readily accept
But
it.
then it's not hashpor. We're talking it's hashpor.
No, it is hashpor.
Hashpor is hischadshus.
No, well, hashpor is the oni does not have this inyan, and the hashpor gives him the sense of it, but this is not his chachos in the same sense that you're changing a whole perspective. The oni doesn't. Let me explain. Let's go back to what we explained in Chach about the stone, because the stone is something which really perplexing us, because we have all kinds of different explanations of the stone flying. We don't need to come to this whole explanation. Even to the very first thing, that when the stone flies, the flight is being carried by the koyach ha'odom, which is not the way we understand it. And the Rebbe is specifically saying it, and it's incumbent upon us to try to understand where is the Rebbe coming
I
from.
didn't understand that either. Why don't we understand that it's what's carrying the stone?
What?
What's carrying the stone?
I'll tell you what the carrying stone. Ask anybody who's studied physics.
You don't need to study physics. The stone just goes by
The
itself.
stone goes. You throw it. You push it. It goes by itself. That's why it's common sense. What? It's common sense.
Why doesn't it go by itself before you threw it?
What?
No.
Why? What?
Why didn't it go by itself before someone threw it?
No.
I don't know.
It doesn't. It's not in flight.
Don't ask me.
But there is no reason why it's not fly. So you make it fly, so it flies. The principle of inertia, this is the law of physics, that an object will be in the same state unless in a given state unless disturbed, unless changed.
So once it's put in a state of flight, it'll fly.
It'll fly, yeah, as long as the
So why does a bird need wings? Once it starts flying, it should fly.
A bird is not an object. A bird has a choice. It stands and it flies. This issue what confronted us. I tell to myself, how am I ever going to convince people that there is such a thing over here as the koyach hazorik? Because everyone knows that in this rike is the flight of the stone is. The stone makes it fly because the weight of the heavier the stone, the further it'll fly. Because the air doesn't stop it, doesn't resist it, and so forth. This is, so to speak, common. It's common sense, and anybody who studied, so to speak, physics knows that this is the law in physics.
You're saying that the koch is continuously.
Excuse me?
We're saying that the koch is continuously carrying it. Is that what you're saying?
That's what the Rebbe says.
Yeah, that's right.
The koyach continues carries it. This we need to understand. What does it mean that it continuously carries it? And the Rebbe explains the perspective that it continues carries it is relative not to the stone being on the ground. A completely different perspective. This is what we try to explain. There are two levels of understanding, of identifying and defining the Indian. The stone is on the ground. The stone is on the ground because it's stone. That's it. Wherever you put it, that's where it is. Then there's another stone on the ground. The stone belongs on the ground by the design of the Creator. What?
By the design of the Creator.
It has to be there. I gave the mashal a table in a house, in a home, in a dining room. Table in a dining room it occupies space exactly the same as the table in the street. In the street it stands there because nothing disturbs it, it stands. In the dining room it stands because it belongs there. There's a human spirit there. Like we said, if the table should break, the dining room table should break, it will be replaced because it belongs there. The dining room itself is begging for the table. It's a completely different phenomenon. The stone, by the definition, by the divine definition of what the world is, there has to be stone on the ground. The earth has to have stones. And the stone have to be populate the ground. We explained, in order to get a better sense of this, we explained that we are talking on the level, the level goes from the Zohar, then from Chochmah. So prior to Chochmah, there is Oineg and Rotzen. Oineg and Rotzen are also means of identifying things. But the identification that is not provided by Oineg and Rotzen is completely different, higher than Chochmah. In what sense? Chochmah is like sight, it's an observer. Observes very clearly, but it's an observer. It is not a participant. Only the Rotzen is a participant in what's happening. And the more I thought about it, I want to say the following. It's an interesting human phenomenon. You have a beautiful city, well paved, well designed, streets with homes properly outlined, properly matched to each other, beautiful. And yet, when people want to kind of experience the world, where do they go? In the wilderness. They go to the Grand Canyon. Ever heard of the Grand Canyon? Grand Canyon is a tremendous ditch in the middle of the earth, with all kind of rocks sticking out all over the place.
It's called hiking.
Huh?
It's called hiking.
Hiking? Well, this is not hiking. You can't hike. You really have to know what you're doing. And that is something that is somehow enticing a person. It's an experience. What's experience? You know what the experience is? On the human level, this is no experience, because it's wilderness, it's wild, it's scary, as a matter of fact. You stand close to it, you say, oh, wait a second, keep me out of there. What is it? You see the grandeur, the power of the Rebbe created in the world. Now, what's there, you're relating not to the world as you experience it, the world that you live in, but the world that Rebbe created. A completely different perspective. And here's what I'd like that we should go together. Think about it. Rebbe created the world, and this represents to me, why does Rebbe create a wilderness? Why doesn't he create a city streets? That would be much more reasonable. I mean, it would make much more sense. After all, Rebbe created the world for human occupation. Why did he create the Grand Canyon and then we have to go tame it? Make streets, flatlands, forget about valleys and mountains. What's the answer? This is what we learned like this Shabbos. The Rebbe is showing, is giving human being the full impact of what it means that it's a Rebbe's creation. This gives us a sense that this is solid rock. There's a reality behind these little streets. These little streets can change overnight. Overnight, you can wake up in the morning, they decided to repave the street. All of a sudden, the whole beautiful pavement is off, and you see the rough terrain. You're not disturbed by it because this is all superficial. But if you all of a sudden see the Grand Canyon over there, you'd get scared. What happened over here? You had an earthquake? the thing that struck me says, hey, interesting. People go out of their way, hundreds of miles, in order to see the wilderness. The rough terrain. Because the rough terrain tells them much more of the power of the Creator than the beauty of the street, of the city. Beauty of the city is seichel, it's chochmatah. It talks about the human experience. This is how the Rebbe defines the creation. This is the solid rock existence. In the solid rock, you can take a cordon of certain areas, make it inhabitable. But you know that you are on a solid rock. You're not in a flimsy area. How do we relate to the solid rock? We can't understand it. It's too wild. We relate to the solid rock because we recognize its reality. Who recognizes its reality? Not chochmah. Oyin again. It's real. This is not something that we can define at all. When we look at this at the Grand Canyon, we cannot begin to explain why this rock is sticking on this one, this one is sticking on this one. When we look on the street, we have a sidewalk and we have a street. We understand every part of it. But in the wild, in the Mabel's creation, you only see the power of the creation. Because the power of the creation is not exclusively, is not limited to human use. It's a real creation. Human use is a small derivative of it. Yes, it is definitely an important purpose in it. Because the creation of the human being on the earth, but the human being is meant to tame the earth. Not to live in the wilderness, the earth the way it was created, to tame it. This is one of the challenges that we should give to the human being.
Are you seeing your own
He should make it inhabitable. What?
Are you seeing your own Einig and Ratzin?
You're not seeing. Einig and Ratzin is a reality. You don't see it.
You go to a site, you go to a panorama.
You go to panorama, and you experience via this quality in you. And if you like this quality, you won't have anything out of it.
But you have to open your eyes to see it first, right? And then it triggers that? Not triggers, we don't like the word maybe, but
you get a smack in the face. You have to open your eyes to know that you got smacked. Oh, yes. If you don't feel the smack, you won't know that you just got smacked.
But over here, it's.
Come on, this is the environment in which you are. This is not that you're observing anything and you understand what you're observing. You don't understand what you're observing. You're completely perplexed by it. What is it about? This is not called sight. Sight is when you can identify what you're seeing. You see the Grand Canyon, you can begin to understand what this is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, you can't even begin to plan, how do I tame it? How do I make it? I don't even think in those terms.
Okay.
Oyen Rotzen is the Mebash's input into the human being. This is the Mebash's presence in the human being. Chochmah is the beginning already of the human process. On a very high level, but it's still a human process. He is a human being and he's observing something. Only in he's a participant in the reality. That's the only way that you can actually relate to the wilderness. I think it's enough not to elaborate anymore. This is clear.
I'm asking if what you're seeing, that's really what's inside of you, because Hashem put the world inside of a person.
I don't know. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. So, okay, let's go to the bottom line of page Kuf Lamed Aleph. We already can turn the page. I just want to, because this is what we were talking about. The Be'il of
Just had a quick question that's been bothering me for a few days.
bother you.
Yeah.
Give me a smack.
In the marshal of the stone.
Of the what?
In the marshal of the stone.
Stone.
Somebody throws the stone and the koyach, or the thrower, is transferred into the stone so he can fly.
Right.
Right?
Okay, I didn't finish. Let me finish explaining this. Let me
No.
finish explaining this.
I want to know.
Let me finish explaining it.
Okay.
So this is a perplexing thing. This is contrary to our baseline understanding of what's happening. The reason this is contrary to our baseline understanding is because we have a superficial view of what is the reality of the world. Our view is the stone is on the ground, it happens to be on the ground. Not true. The stone is on the ground because the Rebbe should put it there. This is how the Rebbe should design the world. Like I said, you look at the Grand Canyon, oh, this is just built. No, this represents the koyach maso. This is a ground base of Mebish's power. But Mebish's definition of a world, of an earth, is all the power that the earth can possibly display. Mountains and valleys, rock that perplexes you, how powerful this is or how huge it is. This is representative of Mebish's creation.
This is why I want to bring a secondary marshal about the stone. From what we just said, if a stone falls by itself on the ground without anybody giving it any koyach, is this considered as Hashem's power? The fact that it's not being thrown by anybody, that the stone falls from altitude to the ground.
Again, I would answer this if I knew where you're coming from. But absolutely, the way this is explained, at least in the law of physics, that the ground has a power. It's called gravity. But the truth is, it's not gravity. On the true level, it's not gravity. The truth is much deeper than gravity. The stone flies down because it belongs there.
What's the source?
This is where it belongs. This is his home. By divine definition. Because by divine definition, this is what the world is. An earth has valleys and mountains and has stones and this is. If anything would be missing, it's a lacking world. It's not a real creation.
That being true, how does it explain that by throwing or moving something, my koyach is mislabish boy? Seemingly, this is doimim. I'm medaber. I move this over here. Done. It's not mislabish boy.
Okay, so this is where we are perplexed. The answer is, when you pick it up and you move it, you're not just moving, not just confronting the physical phenomena. You're confronting a reality. What is the reality? The reality is that by definition of what Earth is, the rock's supposed to be on the Earth. This is his home. This is where it belongs.
Fine. Comes a human being, gets involved, throws it.
A human being has the capability, has the right and the ability to make changes in the world. These changes are fundamental changes. To the extent that he can confront the Grand Canyon and tame it and make it a livable area, if he so desires. If you travel on the highway, on the state thruway, you pass by mountains that were cut in the middle like this,
So wait, that's indicating that what? That by virtue of moving half the mountain away, or creating a neighborhood, or moving this pen, my koch is now imbued into it. Is that the point here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It's
Seemingly,
my
seemingly it's unchanged. It's just material. I just rearranged it like we have in Tanya.
No. You didn't even rearrange it. That's what I'm trying to point out. The effect of this is not that you rearrange, is the effect the physical arrange. You affected the whole perspective. What a mountain is. A mountain is meant to be in the wild, initially. But the mountain is really inhabitable by a human being. You're revealing something completely different that the mountain itself does not speak of. Like I said, you travel on the Yorkshire two-way. And all this,
it's amazing to see.
a straight mountain, a straight wall of a mountain, and this was cut straight like this. And sometimes you see both sides. They made a highway in the middle of a mountain, and they cut and they took away, 100 feet from the middle of the mountain. There's a mountain on this side, a wall of mountain, a wall of mountain, and you go in between. This mountain is going to stay there forever because it's solid rock. This is what I'm saying. The way to relate to this is by relating to the reality of it. Not what human beings made. The reality, this is Eberson's creation. This is a real world. It has capacities beyond any that you can imagine. You think that the mountain has to be whole and understand. You cut it in the middle, and half of it stands here, half of it stands here, and it's fine. So, when you pick up a rock and you throw and make it fly, this is not just a physical phenomenon. This is confronting, so to speak, showing in the very creation itself that there are other aspects in it than what meets the eye. This rock is on the ground and it belongs on the ground. But you know something? It can fly up in the air also.
The raya is because you said a heavier rock will fly further. So within the tchunas of the rock, there's abilities to fly.
No.
No, I don't mean in the chayim of the rock. If the rock would not have.
No, the reason it will fly further is because the koyach that was expended in making it fly is a much stronger koyach.
So why does a heavier rock fly?
Because in order to throw a heavier rock, you have to extend a heavier koyach. And the heavier rock has very little resistance from the air. A lighter rock, the air that it's confronting is a resistance. A heavy rock doesn't feel this air. And that's why it'll fly a little further. And the koyach that you imbued into it is also stronger.
There are erratic boulders. Erratic boulders are rocks that were lifted from a formation many miles away, and they were transported to where summits stand now, in a completely different place. They were lifted by tidal waves.
Mm. This is all part of the Eberson's creation. That's why I said we're all impressed. People go on vacations into the wild. Oh, what a sight! What an experience! What did you see? Can you understand it? Can you relate to it? Can you live there? You see the power of the Creator. You see that this earth, it seems to you that it's all very, very tame, paved, and perfect. You know what power is imbued in it that allows for all this development? You can't even begin to surmise it. The rock is on the ground because it belongs there by divine command, and you are able to pick it up and throw it up in the air. You're changing, you're confronting, so to speak, a fundamental principle in the rock, not a physical principle, a fundamental principle. To take a table out of the house is a very easy thing, but it's a fundamental thing that the table belongs in the house. That's a completely different confrontation. Okay, enough said. Now it's up to. There's a Verbringen one time by Rebbe RASHAB, and a big crowd. And Rebbe RASHAB was verbracht, and the Rayatz was sitting. He was obviously sitting, facing Rebbe all the time. And there was some talking in the back. So the Rebbe Rayatz stood up and says, "Der was viel reden soll trachten." You understand? Anyone who wants to speak should think. Instead of speaking, you should think. It's also an activity. What?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Never thought about it.
Huh? Yeah. So we started talking on Ilavi Yola. Let's go to the bottom line of page Lamadala, just to reiterate and finish the scene. Ilavi Yola and Yesh Mi'ayin are very different things, and the differences are a very important element. So he understands like this. Ilavi Yola Yesh Oifon. Yesh Oifon means there is a means, a manner. Shem Hispashos Huyila Boha Olul B'derech HaMelech. That in Hispashos, when the Yila spreads forth, the Olul comes forth. B'derech HaMelech. The Olul is not being intentionally brought forth. It surfaces automatically. We discussed this already. This Yesh Oifon is implying that there is such a thing, but primarily Ilavi Olul is not that. Ilavi Olul, the Olul is intentionally brought forth. But there is also a manner, an aspect, a certain state, where the Olul is surfaces automatically. Ukmoi, and as we have the quote from the Zohar, the Zohar says, Hai chochmatah. This chochmah is pashtas. Chochmah is pashtas means spreads forth. The api bino bino. And bino comes out from it. This apik bino, it means the chokhmah does not create the bino. It's pashtas. It just expresses itself, and from that bino surfaces. And we explained this. Very quickly. The real presence there is not the chokhmah, not the bina. The real presence there is that which Oineg and Rotzen identify. This is the real power behind all that. Like I said, the real power behind the streets of the house of this city is the rock formations. By the time it comes into chokhmah, it already has a form. Chokhmah perceives it from a human perspective, not from a godly perspective, from the willness. What is it about? What can I do with it? Once chokhmah perceives it, then there is already, so to speak, terrain, like we said, the accordance of terrain, In this area, this is where we can express our chokhmah. In the wild and on the Mount Everest, we cannot do anything. But here we can express what it means for human life. Once you have this perspective, there's a terrain which needs to be populated. We don't know what that means. And this is called hispashtus. Chokhmah is hispashet on the entire terrain. When Chokhmah is hispashet, this is where you belong. Once you say this is where you belong, then you begin to formulate it and say, what can I do with this? It's clear. And after we know, apik mino bino. Bino reveals why do you have this kind of terrain on this size of it? Because it permits for all these things, housing and streets. And this apik mino bino, that's what they say. It's derech memela, because this bino is contained within the chokhmah.